Well, howdy everyone. This is Cliff Honest coming to you from Central Texas, and I wanted to show you a little bit of video with regard to the cattle and the snow and ice event that we had a year ago in mid-February. And this little cold snap we had about a week ago, and the videos I made show you some pretty typical occasional weather in Texas with regard to the cold. But this particular event that I want to show you was a year ago, like I said, February 2021, and there's basically a polar vortex that came through, and you can see on the thermometer that I have in the house, the outdoor temperature is about 8 o'clock in the morning after the snow was 7 degrees Fahrenheit with 75% humidity, and you can see the indoor temperature and indoor humidity. And the important thing that I think I've found with regard to the high humidity and the low temperature is that humidity makes that temperature absolutely bone chilling. I've been in minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit in Colorado at Steamboat Springs. I've been in multiple days of minus 20 degrees up in Fort Collins, Colorado, and neither of those places did I feel quite as chilled as I do here with the humidity. So the high humidity is a real interesting phenomenon, and certainly it's going to affect your animals the same way. So you got to have good preparations and be thinking ahead when you know these events are coming. And thankfully, with the weather forecasting services that are available to us, we can look and see what's coming typically and be pretty prepared with our animals. So I'm going to show you some video of the cattle and some of the things I did to try to help them survive this. This kind of event is extremely rare here. I've lived here since 1989, and I've not seen cold and snow and ice to the degree that we saw it at that point. And it certainly had a huge effect on our electrical grid. Ice is very damaging. Limbs bust, knock down power lines. You could walk outside and hear limbs absolutely breaking, and it sounded like gunshots going off. And I mean, we lost a lot of limbs off of trees. So I want to detail that with you. Hang on, and we'll show you what happened. The next morning after the storm, the cattle heard the tractor and started moving, and I found them back against that Yopon thicket back there in the background right there, and they were using that for a windbreak and just huddled there as a group. And so when they heard the tractor, they were on the move then, looking for some respite from the weather, I assume. And you can see they're in good shape. Their body condition is like I would hope for wintertime, and I was feeding them good. But you can see, I mean, they're covered with ice and snow, and it's 7 degrees. It probably was about 10 below zero, probably with the wind chill. And what I did was I took and put on the other side of another group of Yopon and brush that provided a windbreak. I unrolled hay so that they would obviously be able to eat, but more importantly, as I unrolled the hay and saw what they were doing, they wanted to lay down on it, and they were cold. They had been standing up all night, and they needed a place just to lay down and rest and ruminate. And so over the course of the next 4 or 5 days, I just enlarged this area where I unrolled the hay. I did not go over any of the hay that was unrolled twice. I just kept enlarging it along that hillside, and those cattle really hunkered down and did well. We got quite a bit of ice. We were having pretty significant electrical issues with regard to the grid. We maintained electricity for the first couple of days, and I thought we were probably going to be in pretty good shape. But then we started experiencing rolling blackouts, and the electricity would be off for 45 minutes to an hour and then come on for 15 to 20 minutes. And that went on for another day or so until we finally lost all electricity totally. And so I had a generator hooked up, and we were able to run our lights and some small appliances. But that was quite the event with regard to the whole state being in a pretty big jam with electric power. So the tree limbs were loaded with ice, which water is very heavy. You could walk outside and hear tree limbs breaking. Sounded like gunshots going off, and they were just exploding. We had a lot of tree limbs that were broken off the trees that we had to clean up later. But the one thing that I would say is most important, at least in this area, based on what I learned at this event, is to unroll the hay and let those cattle have a place to lay down. Cattle like to lay down and ruminate, and I think that really was a good situation for the cattle that I hadn't realized prior to this event. And I'd never unrolled hay before. I'd always put it out with a ring around it, and they wouldn't have had any place to lay down that was warm, and the baby calves would have huddled up around those hay rings, and then the cows are coming in, and I suspect they would have crushed a calf or two. So really important, I think, for cold weather, which again we don't get very often, but that event made me realize how important it was. Another reason that's important to roll out hay. As the electrical grid problems progressed, we went from rolling blackouts to finally lost all power, and that created some significant issues, one of which was water for the cattle. Without electricity to make our wells work, we were unable to water the cattle out of the watering troughs as we usually do. We've got ponds in every pasture, but they were so frozen that I was afraid the cattle would get out in there and break through the ice, and we'd have some issues with that. The cattle weren't very thirsty, it didn't seem like, but I was able to keep one well going for just a little while with the generator. But then we had generator issues, and that option went away. But the long and the short of it is that water for the cattle, even in a snow event where they could have eaten snow probably for water intake, it's a most important thing that we can provide for them. So that became a little bit of an issue. I chopped water on the edge of the ponds, and they were able to get some water, but that was tough. No electricity to pump water from 4 different wells that I have. I wasn't set up with an appropriate generator, which I've made that adjustment, and now have generator capabilities that will at least allow one well to run, and we can provide water for the entire herd of cattle via well water. But all those things that you never think about when you live in a very temperate climate like ours, and then you have an event like this, and it makes a lot of things come into pretty clear focus. So water, very important. A place for the cattle to lay down, I think, ended up being very important. And then contingency plans for electricity became quite important. The ice created another challenge, and that was how to get the rolls unwrapped and the netting off. And with a little bit of effort, most of the time I could break the netting loose and get it off the bales, but in numerous instances I was unable to do that, and so I would cut the netting low on the bale where there wasn't as much ice, and then just go to unrolling it, and it eventually would shake loose, and we'd get the bale unrolled. But that was quite the challenge. It's not nearly as bad with twine, but that netting really freezes on solidly, so not anything that I can think of to do about that other than store your hay in a barn, which I don't have that capability, but that would be something in the future that I would like to accomplish, and that would be to build a big barn covered with a roof so that I could store the hay. Meet Ruby, our pet pig. Ruby is about 2.5 years old now, and she was supposed to be quote-unquote a miniature pig, but my soft heart feeds her whatever she wants, and she grew to about 130 pounds. She's housebroke. We used to let her in the house all the time when she was a little bit slimmer and could make the trek from her pen to the house, and she'd follow us right in and make herself at home. But she was short-haired, very cold, and we let her in the house and kept her in the house for about 10 days, and she would go to the bathroom and do her business in a litter box that we made for her, and she just is a wonderful pet. If you want to see Ruby and some videos of Ruby, go to my Instagram at Cliff Honus, and you can check out Ruby. So, as you would expect, anytime there's any adverse weather, there's always going to be a cow that's going to calve, or multiple cows that are going to calve. And I knew this cow was getting close prior to the storm, and I was watching her pretty close. Well, of course, overnight when we got the snowstorm, she disappeared, and there's about 40 acres of woods on the property that she was on, or in the pasture she was on, and I didn't even really go look for her. I figured she's either going to have the calf and they would survive or not. And she did have the calf. Obviously she had the calf on the snow, and it was another 2 days before they showed up, and I was very elated because I was getting pretty bummed that she probably had the calf on the snow and the thing froze to death. But lo and behold, he was happy and healthy, and he survived as well, and I was very thankful for that. So always be watching your cattle. Adverse weather events, they're gonna calve if it's the right time of year, and so this weather shut us down, so I wasn't able to get out and look for her. I was using all my time just to feed cattle and take care of things at the clinic. We had, I think, 27 horses in the hospital during this period of time, and just getting water to them every day and breaking the water and refilling buckets was a huge chore. So we had a lot of things going on, and I was in a position where I was willing to take a chance on this cow, and thankfully she came through with her calf. So here we are about 5 days after the initial storm. You can see the cattle are in pretty good shape. They weathered everything fairly well, and you can see up on the hill where I had been unrolling hay. I unrolled more hay over the course of the next several days to cover that snowy area up there at the top. And boy, that was a boon to grass growth this past summer. So this was our experience, February 2021. We learned a lot of things. Hope you can take some points home for your operation. Have a great day.